The sound of $12,000 shattering sounds exactly like you'd expect. Sharp, expensive, and final. It was the centerpiece of the engagement party, a vintage champagne pyramid, stacked 7 levels high on terracotta tiles that cost more than my entire year of physical therapy. I didn't even feel the glass slicing my arms at first. I just felt the cold, sticky wetness of the alcohol soaking into my dress, mixing with the sudden warmth of my own blood. My head was ringing, my pulse thudding against my eardrums like a trapped bird. But what I remember most vividly isn't the pain, it isn't the gasps of the 100 guests frozen around us. It's my sister's face. Chloe was standing over me, her knuckles white, her chest heaving. She wasn't checking to see if I was bleeding. She wasn't screaming for help. She was screaming about aesthetics. "You ruined it," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You brought that ugly black chair on purpose. It clashes with everything. My live stream is ruined." I tried to push myself up, but my arms slipped on the wet tile. Shards of crystal bit deeper into my palms. I looked up at her, really looked at her, and I realized something terrifying. She didn't see her sister lying on the floor. She saw a prop that had malfunctioned. She saw a stain on her perfect, beige reality. Before we dive into this mess, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand why my sister looked at me with that level of hatred, you have to go back 60 minutes. You have to understand the stage she had set. The Cliffside Golf Club in Scottsdale is beautiful in the way a magazine is beautiful, expensive, curated, and completely lifeless. For her engagement party, Chloe had dictated a strict theme: desert chic. In practice, this meant 300 people standing around in 50 shades of oatmeal, linen, and terracotta. The desert sun beat down on us, flattening everything into a monochromatic blur. There was no color, there was no contrast, there was just an endless sea of beige. And then, there was me. I rolled onto the patio in my custom exoframe. It's not a hospital chair. It's a $15,000 piece of aerospace-grade titanium. Matte black, sleek, and built for speed. I paid for it with the settlement money I wasn't supposed to have. It's the only reason I can navigate a world that wasn't built for me. It is my freedom. But against the soft, filtered backdrop of Chloe's party, I looked like an ink blot on a wedding dress. I felt the shift in the atmosphere the moment I crossed the threshold. Conversations didn't just stop. They curdled. I saw a woman in a taupe jumpsuit lean into her husband, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes locked on my legs. I saw William's mother take a sip of her drink and look away, as if I were something obscene. I wheeled toward the bar, trying to keep my head up, trying to find a corner where I could disappear. That's when I heard it. "Can't believe she even came," a voice whispered behind a large potted cactus. "Chloe said she's been popping pills all morning." "I heard she can walk when she wants to," another voice replied, low and conspiratorial. "Chloe told me she catches her standing up when she thinks no one is looking. It's all for attention. It's sick, really." My grip tightened on the rims of my wheels until my knuckles ached. This was the whisper campaign. I realized then that Chloe hadn't just invited me to ignore me. She had spent months prepping this audience. She had planted the seeds that I was an addict, a liar, a drama queen using a wheelchair as a prop to steal her spotlight. To these people, I wasn't a paraplegic survivor. I was a villain trying to upstage the bride. I scanned the crowd and found Chloe. She was standing near the edge of the cliff, posing for a photographer, bathed in golden light. She looked perfect, but then her eyes snapped to me, and the smile vanished. It wasn't just annoyance. It was a cold, reptilian rage. See, you have to understand the mechanics of a narcissist to understand what happened next. To a normal person, my wheelchair is a medical device, it's a tool, but to Chloe, it was a personal insult. In her mind, I hadn't brought a chair because I'm paralyzed. She believed I brought it at her. It was a narcissistic injury. My black titanium frame was a flaw in her design, a reality she couldn't filter, edit, or control. It challenged her delusion that she was the main character of a perfect life. By simply existing in a way that wasn't beige and compliant, I was attacking her ego. I wasn't a sister in that moment, I was a stain. And Chloe has always been obsessive about removing stains. She handed her champagne flute to a waiter, smoothed her linen dress, and began walking toward me. She didn't look like a sister coming to say hello. She looked like a predator who had just spotted a wounded animal that needed to be put down. Chloe stopped 3 feet in front of me. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she turned her head and nodded to a cameraman I hadn't noticed before. He stepped out from the crowd, holding a gimbal with a phone mounted on it. The red, live icon was glowing on the screen. "Okay guys," Chloe said, her voice shifting into her bright, performative, influencer tone. She beamed at the camera, ignoring the fact that her fiancé's godmother was watching her with a look of pure horror. "We're gonna do something fun. You guys have been asking to see this trend all week." She turned back to me, her smile tight and predatory. "Scarlett, we're doing the drop. You know, the trend where everyone drops to the beat? I need you to stand up for it. Just for a second." The request was so absurd, so deliberately cruel, that for a moment I couldn't process it. "Chloe," I said, my voice low. "I can't stand up. I'm paralyzed. You know this." "Oh, stop it," she laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off the canyon walls. "You stand up at home all the time," Mom told me. "Stop being such a drama queen and just do it for the talk. It'll be cute." The whisper campaign again. She wasn't just asking me to do something impossible. She was publicly accusing me of lying about my disability. She was framing my paralysis as a choice, a stubborn refusal to participate in her joy. "I have a 10 spinal injury," I said, looking directly into the camera lens. "I literally cannot move my legs. I am not doing this." Chloe's smile vanished. The mask slipped. "You selfish bitch," she hissed, stepping closer. "You just want to ruin everything, don't you? You brought this prop to steal attention, and now you won't even help me make one video? Fine, I'll help you." She reached out. Her manicured hands clamped onto the titanium frame of my chair. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic spiking in my chest. "Helping you participate," she snarled. Before I could react, she heaved. She put her entire body weight into the shove, the world tilted sideways. I felt the sickening lurch of gravity disappearing as my chair tipped past the point of no return. I didn't have time to scream. I just had time to see the terrified faces of the guests blur past me. Then, impact. I crashed into the champagne tower. Glass exploded. The heavy crystal bottles rained down on me like artillery fire. I hit the floor hard, my shoulders slamming into the tiles, my legs tangling in the wreckage of the chair. Pain flared hot and bright across my skin. Silence fell over the desert. No one moved, no one breathed. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of $12,000 worth of champagne. "My dress!" Chloe screamed, staring at the splatter of wine on her linen skirt. "You clumsy idiot! Look what you did!" I lay there, stunned, tasting blood. But then, movement caught my eye. Dr. Lori stepped out from the crowd. She wasn't rushing to help me, not yet. She was standing perfectly still, her phone raised, the camera lens pointed directly at Chloe. She hadn't just watched, she had recorded every single second in 4K resolution. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic and inevitability. I sat on the edge of the gurney, watching the doctor tie off the last stitch on my forearm. 30 stitches in total. Small, black knots holding my skin together where the vintage crystal had tried to flay me open. The door opened, and William walked in. He looked like a man who had just watched a ghost crawl out of a television screen. His face was gray. He was still holding his suit jacket, his knuckles white against the fabric. "I didn't know," he whispered. He didn't come closer. He looked afraid to touch me. Afraid that if he did, the reality of what he'd almost married into would shatter him completely. The rumors, the addiction. I didn't know she was saying those things. "Now you do," I said. My voice was raspy, but steady. "I saw the video," he said, his voice breaking. "Dr. Lori showed me. She threw you like you were garbage, Scarlett." Before I could answer, the door banged open again. Richard and Carrie, my parents, burst into the room. They weren't looking at my bandaged arms. They weren't looking at the bruise forming on my temple. They were looking for a police officer. When they saw the room was clear of law enforcement, Their shoulders dropped in collective relief. Thank God, my mother breathed, rushing to the bedside. Did you talk to them yet? Did you give a statement? I gave a statement to the intake nurse, I said. But not the police, my father interjected, stepping forward. Good, we can still fix this. We can call it a misunderstanding. Sisterly roughhousing that got out of hand. I stared at them. I wasn't surprised. I was just exhausted. She threw me into a glass tower, Dad. There's 4K footage of it. She was stressed. My mother snapped, tears welling in her eyes, tears for Chloe. Never for me. You know how she gets when she's overwhelmed. She didn't mean to hurt you. She just wanted you to participate. Participate in a stunt I physically cannot do? You provoked her, my father said. He said it with the confidence of a man who has spent 20 years rewriting reality to suit his comfort. You brought that aggressive black chair. You knew it would upset her aesthetic. You know how sensitive she is about visuals. Why couldn't you just cover it up? Why did you have to be so difficult? I looked at them, really looked at them, and for the first time, I understood the mechanism of our family. See, people think enablers are peacemakers. They think parents like mine are just trying to keep everyone happy, but that's a lie. My parents are hostages. Chloe is a terrorist. She is a bomb that could go off at any moment, destroying their reputation, their peace, their illusion of a happy family. And instead of defusing the bomb, they decided it was easier to just feed it. I was the sacrifice. I was the meat they threw to the beast to keep it from eating them. They didn't hate me. They just valued their own comfort more than my safety. Keeping the peace was just a euphemism for letting Chloe win so she doesn't scream at us. They were willing to let me bleed out on a hospital floor if it meant they didn't have to deal with a scandal. We are not filing charges, my mother said firmly, pulling a document out of her purse. It's an NDA. We'll pay your medical bills, obviously, but this stays in the family. We protect family, Scarlett. I looked at the document, then I looked at William, who was staring at my parents with a look of pure revulsion. No, I said. My father blinked. Excuse me? I said no, I'm not signing that, and I'm not protecting her anymore. Scarlett, my father's voice dropped, the warning tone I had been trained to fear my entire life. If you ruin your sister's life over an accident, you are cutting yourself off from this family. Do you understand? You will be on your own. I looked at the stitches on my arm. I looked at the wheelchair in the corner. I had been on my own for years, they just hadn't noticed. I'm not ruining her life, Dad, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm just pressing play. I didn't tear up the NDA. I didn't scream at my parents to get out. I simply handed the document back to my father with the same energy I would use to return a meal I hadn't ordered. I'm going to need a lawyer, I said. And not the family friend you use for your tax returns. Dr. Lori came through the next morning. She introduced me to a man named Marcus, a litigator who wore suits that cost more than my first car, and had eyes like a great white shark sensing blood in the water. He didn't care about family harmony. He cared about leverage. We're not just suing for the assault, Marcus told me, sitting in my hospital room while Dr. Lori stood guard by the door. If your sister has been slandering you to damage your reputation, that's defamation. But first, I want to look at the financials. People who feel entitled to physically harm you usually feel entitled to your assets too. I gave him access to everything. I signed release forms, power of attorney documents, and medical record authorizations. Then, he brought in a forensic accountant. For 3 days, they dug. They went through tax returns, insurance claims, and bank records my parents had tried to keep private. I sat in my hospital bed, watching the desert sun track across the floor, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Tuesday. Marcus walked in, and he wasn't holding a notepad. He was holding a single, crisp sheet of paper. He placed it on my tray table. Scarlett, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Tell me about the insurance settlement from the accident 3 years ago. I frowned. There wasn't one. My parents told me the insurance company denied the claim because it was a recreational vehicle accident on private property. They said we got nothing. That's why I had to pay for my own wheelchair. That's why I'm still paying off my surgery bills. Marcus didn't blink. He just tapped the paper. That is a lie. I looked down. It was a copy of a payout confirmation from the insurance provider, dated 3 years ago. The amount was staggering. $850,000. They paid out the maximum liability policy, Marcus explained, because the driver of the other jet ski, your sister, Chloe, was found fully at fault for reckless operation. The check was issued to you, Scarlett. My ears started to ring. I never saw that check. I know, Marcus said. He pulled out a second document. It was a deposit slip. The check was deposited into a joint account managed by your parents. The signature on the back endorsing it over to them? It's supposed to be yours. I looked at the signature. It was shaky. It was a forgery. My mother's handwriting, trying to look like mine. Where is the money? I whispered. Marcus flipped to the next page. It was a flowchart of transactions. The money hadn't gone to my medical bills. It hadn't gone to my rehabilitation. It hadn't gone to making my parents' home accessible so I could visit. It had been transferred, systematically, over 36 months, into an account labeled the Chloe Fund. It paid for the Cliffside engagement party. It paid for the vintage champagne tower. It paid for her linen dresses, her trips to Tulum, her influencer lifestyle. My parents hadn't just protected Chloe from the consequences of breaking my spine. They had paid her for it. They had stolen the money meant to put my life back together, and used it to fund the very lifestyle Chloe used to mock me. Every time she posted a photo of a luxury handbag, she was buying it with my legs. I looked up at Marcus. The tears didn't come. The sadness evaporated, burned away by a heat so intense it felt like a fever. This isn't a civil dispute anymore, is it? I asked. Marcus smiled, a cold, sharp expression that promised violence. No, Scarlett. This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. And we have the receipts. We met in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. My parents and Chloe were already seated on one side of the mahogany table. They looked annoyed, not afraid. To them, this was just a transaction, an inconvenient toll they had to pay to make the problem go away. Chloe was scrolling on her phone, looking bored, as if facing a lawsuit for assault was just another tedious errand, like waiting in line at the DMV. My father, Richard, didn't wait for me to sit down. He slid a check across the table. $10,000, he said, his voice tight. That covers your medical bills plus a little extra for pain and suffering. Take it, sign the NDA, and let's end this charade. I didn't look at the check. I looked at Marcus. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply opened his briefcase and placed a tablet on the table, facing them. He pressed play. The 4K video of the assault filled the silence. The sound of my body hitting the glass tower was even louder on the tablet's speakers. I watched my parents flinch. I watched Chloe stop scrolling. For the first time, they were seeing it not through the lens of sisterly drama, but through the lens of a felony prosecutor. That's Exhibit A, Marcus said, his voice dry. Assault causing bodily injury to a disabled person. Mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines suggest 3 to 5 years. We already discussed this, my mother snapped, though her hands were trembling. We aren't pressing charges. No, I said. You aren't. But the state can. And I can. Marcus slid a second stack of documents across the table. It landed with a heavy thud. And this, Marcus said, is Exhibit B. Wire fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. My father picked up the papers. I watched his face turn the color of ash. He saw the insurance payout. He saw the transfer logs. He saw the paper trail of every dollar they had stolen from my spine to pay for their country club membership. We were holding it for her, my mother stammered, looking at the documents over his shoulder. For her future care. You spent it on a vintage champagne tower, I said. You spent it on Chloe's G-Wagon. You spent it on the deposit for the Cliffside venue. The room went deadly quiet. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a countdown. Here is the offer, Marcus said. He leaned forward, looking like a shark smelling blood in the water. You have 72 hours to return the full principal of $850,000, plus statutory interest. That brings the total to $912,000. We don't have that kind of cash liquid, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. It's tied up in assets. It's in the house. Then sell the house, I said. The words hung there, heavy and absolute. "You can't be serious," Chloe screeched. "You want them to sell our home? Where am I supposed to live?" "I don't care," I said. And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it. "Sell the house. Sell the cars. Liquidate your retirement accounts. I want every single penny back by Friday at 5 p.m. "And if we don't?" my mother whispered. "Then I walk out of here and drive straight to the district attorney's office," I replied. "I give them the video. I give them the bank records. And you all go to prison. Not just Chloe for the assault. All of you. For the fraud." I watched the realization hit them. It was a physical blow. My father slumped in his chair. A man whose entire identity was built on control. Realizing he had absolutely none left, he did the math in his head. He knew what he had to do. To save their freedom, they had to burn their image to the ground. They had to destroy the very lifestyle they had stolen my money to maintain. Chloe burst into tears, not for me, but for her inheritance evaporating in front of her eyes. "Tick-tock," I said, standing up. "You have 3 days." The desert heat didn't break all at once. It faded, slowly, into a cool, sharp autumn breeze. I don't live in Scottsdale anymore. I moved 3 states away, to a place where the leaves turn gold, and the air smells like rain instead of dry dust. I used the settlement money, $912,000. Wired at 4:55 p.m. on that Friday deadline to buy a plot of land. I designed the house myself. It's an architectural love letter to adaptive living. There are no stairs. The hallways are wide enough to turn a tank in. The counters hover at the perfect height. It isn't a hospital, it's a sanctuary. I used the remainder of the funds to launch a nonprofit foundation dedicated to designing accessible spaces that don't look like medical facilities. We call it the Titanium Project. I heard through Dr. Lori that my parents are renting a 2-bedroom condo near the highway. The cliffside house sold at a loss to a cash buyer. The country club memberships are gone. The image they sacrificed their daughter to protect has evaporated. As for Chloe, William watched the video. Then he watched it again. Then he packed his bags. The last I heard, she was trying to pivot her influencer brand to humble beginnings, but the internet has a long memory, and the comments section never forgets. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty. They ask how I could take my father's retirement, how I could leave my mother with nothing, how I could burn the bridge to the ground and never look back. They talk about forgiveness. They talk about being the bigger person. But here is the truth I found in the ashes. Radical autonomy isn't about cruelty, it's about survival. For years, I thought leaving them would be an act of abandonment. I thought cutting ties meant I was a failure, as a daughter, a sister, a human being, but I realized that staying would have been the real abandonment. I would have been abandoning myself. I didn't steal their future, I reclaimed mine. I took back the years they stole, the dignity they trampled, and the safety they sold for a champagne tower. I stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I'm sitting on my patio now, watching the sun dip below the tree line. My custom titanium wheelchair gleams in the twilight. It's matte black. It's aggressive. It's unapologetic. And it fits the aesthetic perfectly. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, share this story. You never know who needs permission to walk away.